Rob Flax here. I play things with strings, I hit stuff, and I sing. And today it's time for part 2 of my home studio tour. Specifically, I'm focusing on the Mothership pedal board. Ooh. Most of the time I'm recording my violin through this, but also several other things. So stick around and I'll show you what pedals I have on here and why I've got it routed the way I do. In part 1 we talked about the Yamaha Ensemble mixer, the EM90A, that's halfway through the signal chain, so I'll mention that briefly and just say go check out that video for the rest. Everything really starts on this pedal board with the Boss ES8. Now, right now I've got it in stomp box mode, which is almost the same as if I just had every regular pedal turning on and off. Each of these loops represents a pedal, or possibly a couple pedals in series if I like a combo platter. There's only 8 loops and there's more than 8 things, so a couple loops I doubled up. Here's the rundown. In loop 1 I have the Chase Bliss automaton, the Benson Preamp Mark II. I'm going to mute the room mic so you can hear the sound of my pickup. Not going into that, actually I'll just turn everything off. There we go. So here's the pickup dry. Perfectly acceptable sound, but I'd like to give it just a little bit more shaping and occasionally some overdrive. So here it is with loop 1. So it's not doing too much, and to my ears that's an ideal thing. I like having the automaton as my always on sort of sculpting. However, it has presets, and if you've watched my video for the Fuzz Fiddle series, there's definitely some good overdrive and fuzz tones in there. Those are controllable by preset, and once I finish wiring it up, I should be able to select those presets using the ES8. It can send MIDI messages and tell the automaton to change presets. Right now, I'm going to move on because there's a lot to cover on this board. You can watch that other video for some more of the automaton sounds. I'm going to leave this on for the rest of the thing. Next, I'm going to jump ahead to loop 5. Why loop 5? Well, loop 5 is the one that I'm usually using next, and that's because that contains the Crazy Tube Circuits Golden Ratio compressor. Again, I'll do an A-B before and after. Now you might have heard a little bit of clipping there. There's a little bit of boost from that compressor. That's partially because usually there's a gain stage in the middle, and that is loop 7. That's my send and return to the Yamaha EM90A ensemble mixer. Now we get Spring Reverb if we want. But also the level gets a little more controlled. So have a listen to 5 without and then 5 with 7. So that seems counterintuitive, like it's a really hot output level, but then going into loop 7, the mixer brings it lower, I guess. It works, it sounds good, and it means that once the mixer's in the loop, I can add things like Spring Reverb. Ooh yeah! I've sort of glossed over a couple of things. Loop 5, in addition to the compressor, contains the Meris Enzo, which often I use as my cello button. It should be a cello sound right now. Just octave down, right? Without it. With it. love Spring Reverb. The other thing in loop 7 is it's going through the synesthesia, mono in, stereo out to go up to the mixer. So of course, there's a jillion synesthesia effects. I made a video on that before, but here it is with some harmonic tremolo. Yeah, might want to have some dirt to go with that. So let's also bring in loop 2, which is the Bleep fuzz from Rainger Effects. I love how small it is, and I love how big it sounds. I'm going to mute the mics. So a little bit of modulation effects. That harmonic tremolo just happens to be what I have pulled up right now. There's phasers and rotary simulators and choruses and all kinds of good stuff in the synesthesia. Very useful pedal, both because it serves as the split point, and there's kind of exactly one loop on the ES8 where it could go. Loop 7 has mono in and stereo out. Perfect for the synesthesia, but why not throw a mixer in there at the same time? In that mixer, I also have this keyboard, which is just out of frame. That's the Novation Summit. Right now I have a patch on there called Floating Ether, and I've used that to great effect as a lovely floaty pad for a lot of yoga music. Check out my Patreon page for an entire month's worth, like 800 minutes of yoga music. That's loop 7 with the synesthesia, and we've talked about loop 5. The Enzo does all kinds of things. I'm gonna link to Bad Snacks' video on how she uses the Meris Enzo to turn her electric violin into a synthesizer. I think she did a great job of explaining how that works really well. For the most part, I've just been using it as a pitch shifter, and eventually, once I've MIDI'd this thing up, the Enzo can be turned on and off and change preset via MIDI messages, which is why it's sharing a loop with the always-on crazy tube circuits. So that's my theory there. Okay, the other loops. Loop 3 has the U235 suboctave generator. This is my favorite octave down pedal. Check it out. So that's the U235. Sounds awesome, super handy, like it a lot. Stacks surprisingly well with the Bleep, and so those pair nicely together. In loop 4, we have the warped vinyl, which is just over there, just out of frame next to the synesthesia, and before that the OC3 Boss Super Octave, which is turned off. So if I turn on loop 4 right now, you should only hear the warped vinyl adding some sounds. Let me mute the mics and you can hear its warbly chorus. Maybe let's add Spring Reverb. And for giggles, let's hear the OC3. Actually, that's the OC3 and the warp vinyl working together. So if you've been counting carefully, you'll notice that the Enzo is a pitch shifter, the OC3 is a pitch shifter, the U235 is a pitch shifter, and yes, there are a couple more pitch shifters on here. Technically, the Empress Zoia can do some pitch shifting as well. I rarely use it for that because I have 3 other pedals that do it nicely. The Bliss Thermae is in loop 6, and right now I have it just set as a standard analog delay. Let's hear that. I'll leave the little bit of crunchier overdrive setting on the preamp. So I'm very, very biased. I'm pro Thermae, so much so that I got the t-shirt. Thank you, Joel. I love this pedal. It's my favorite pedal of all time. The Thermae is the quintessential analog delay as far as I'm concerned. But it also does some pitch shifting, so... sound is so good with some Spring Reverb, and maybe let's bring in some of the CXM 1978 on a beautiful floaty sound. That Spring Reverb, automaton reverb, and the pitch shifting of the Thermae. Let me mute the mics. Chase Bliss is my happy place. I'm blissful when I use Chase Bliss products. What can I say? That was the automaton, the Thermae, the other automaton, and up there I've got the Condor, the Blooper, the Dark World, the Warped Vinyl. I might have a favorite brand. Sorry. Anything else that we haven't covered so far? Ah yes, Loop 8. That is the Zoia and the Avalanche run. Again, I'm doubling up one pedal that can be turned on and off via MIDI and one pedal that can only be turned on manually. So the Avalanche run is on right now. Let's hear what that sounds like. I'll turn off the CXM. That can also be controlled by MIDI. Really got to get around to MIDIing this thing up. Otherwise, it's just the same as a regular old pedal board. Okay, just the Avalanche run now. My standard 157. Let's turn off the Spring Reverb. There we go. Okay, let's hear how I use the Avalanche run. That's right, reverse delay. Very nice. Okay, so all of that is going into the GFI Cabzeus, which then is going into my interface over here. But it's then coming out of the Cabzeus and going into the Boomerang, which is my favorite mega looper. I've taught several masterclasses on looping, and I almost always, when people ask, what's the best looper pedal I should buy, I recommend the Boomerang. So that means I can loop anything, but since this is after the Cabzeus and then being sent to its own stereo DI box in the back, I actually have 4 XLR outputs coming out of this pedal board. 2 for the regular signal through the Cabzeus, and 2 for the Boomerang loopable stuff. And that means I can do looping and multi-track record it without having to play over and with the same loop as the same audio track. So I can have the loop on its own track, and I can mix and EQ it differently and separately, and that's a lot more control. Not going to do that for you now because you know what the loop sounds like, probably. But maybe more of that in another video if you're curious about how I use the Boomerang. Happy to talk about that more. So I think that's everything, right? Oh, there's one other thing, and that is at the far end of this pedal board, there is room for an expression pedal. I'm using the Dunlop Volume X Mini, and that is plugged into the ES8, which can then send via MIDI expression variables to anything that accepts MIDI CCs, which is more than half the board here. So the automatones both will accept expression, the Zoia will accept expression, the Synesthesia accepts expression, the Enzo, the warped vinyl, the Thermae, all of these could be expression controlled. Probably mostly what I'll use it for is volume and doing volume swells. Previously, when I didn't have the ES8, I just had it plugged into the Benson Preamp Mark II, and I would use it for volume swells. Did that a lot for my ambient music stuff that I recorded for the Mindful May series. If you're curious about that, there's details on my Patreon page, and I mentioned it in a couple of other videos. So it's useful to be able to swell in when you're plucking things. That's a very sort of ambient guitar trick, and even though my bow can swell in, I can't really swell into triple stops. So that's what I'm using that for. And once I get all the MIDI stuff wired up, that'll be useful for that as well. Of course, once I get the MIDI stuff wired up as well, this chessboard just off screen here will be able to send MIDI messages to my pedals. I can control these pedals with the chessboard. I'm very excited about that. A lot of work to do to get that working. Need to work with my collaborator Sean on that, and stay tuned for more details. But in the meantime, that's that. Now, this is still not all of the setup. That's most of it. You've seen the pedal board. The previous video went over the mixer and a little bit of the Klein bottle board. But above this camera, you'll see in part 3, I've got some other fun goodies. And stay tuned for that. Talk you through part 3, a little bit more of the synthesizer-y things in this setup, and my new matrix mixer thing. So really excited. Stay tuned for part 3. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this and you're getting a kick out of this pedal board experimentation, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel so you know when the third part comes out, and if you'd like to support my work and get access to a ton of music that I've recorded using this pedal board setup, please go to patreon.com/robflax for more on that. Appreciate your support. See you in the next one. Bye.